Coming up today, South and North Korea put their militaries back on peacetime mode following last week's inter-Korean deal that diffused tensions between the two sides. In one of the biggest rallies Japan has seen in years, tens of thousands of protesters gather in Tokyo to oppose a law allowing the military to fight overseas. Plus, the vice chairman of the US Federal Reserve hints at a rate hike in September. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, August 31st here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to our early morning edition of Arirang News. And we start with the welcome news that the militaries of South and North Korea have relaxed their defence postures to peacetime levels following a landmark deal that diffused tensions between the two sides. A source within the South Korean military says the highest alert level issued for frontline units and the Jindoge-1 issued at times of heightened local threats by the enemy have all been lifted. North Korea has also lifted its special duty order for frontline units, along with the quasi-war state that had been declared by Kim Jong-un ahead of last Tuesday's deal. North Korean soldiers that had been deployed to the frontline areas during the recent confrontation have also returned to their regular units. It seems the next round of high-level talks between the two Koreas could centre around the unification ministers of both sides. South Korean government sources say Seoul feels that discussions surrounding war-separated family reunions and the possible resumption of tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang should involve Hong Yong-pyo, the South's unification minister, and Kim Yang-gon, the head of the North's United Front Department of the Korean Workers' Party responsible for South Korea-related affairs. They added that high-level meetings like the recent 2+2 talks involving South Korea's presidential security advisor Kim Kwan-jin and North Korea's Army Politburo chief Hwang Byung-seo are only necessary when inter-Korean tensions reach dangerous levels. It remains to be seen, however, how Pyongyang will respond to Seoul's suggestion. South Korea has again urged Japan to take specific measures to resolve the Japanese military's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. Korea's Foreign Ministry spokesman No Kwang-il says the Japanese government must take concrete action to swiftly resolve the issue, as stressed by President Park Geun-hye in her Liberation Day address back on August 15th. The spokesman also urged the Abe administration to make sincere efforts to maintain the historical perceptions of past administrations in Japan. In 2011, Korea's Constitutional Court ruled the Japanese government's lack of effort to resolve the issue was unconstitutional. Tens of thousands of Japanese took to the streets of Tokyo on Sunday to protest against a controversial new security bill. The latest rally dwarfed a string of similar protests in recent months, with celebrities and opposition party leaders taking part. Anti-war citizens groups say more than 120,000 people gathered outside the Diet building and that around 300 rallies were held nationwide. Many of the protesters were calling for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to resign. The Abe administration is in the process of passing legislation that would allow the deployment of Japanese troops abroad for the first time since World War II. Now, Abe insists this move is necessary to allow Japan to deal with the changing security environment. However, many Japanese fear it will drag Japan into unnecessary wars. Legal scholars have also labelled the changes unconstitutional, and polls show many Japanese citizens oppose the changes and want to protect the nation's post-war pacifist constitution. Once again, there's discord between Korea's rival political parties, this time over the creation of a panel to review the government's special allowances. They hope to reach an agreement on this issue soon, as the National Assembly is supposed to start its regular session this week. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party, wants to set up a reform committee at the National Assembly to overhaul the government's special allowances, which are granted to government officials and lawmakers on a monthly basis for personal activities, and are often referred to as easy money. Therefore, the MPAD is demanding transparency with the disclosure of all spending of the allowances by government officials. However, the ruling Saenuri Party opposes because it claims full disclosure could compromise confidentiality of certain activities, such as those related to the National Intelligence Service, the nation's top spy agency. While rival parties continue to be at loggerheads over such issues, the National Assembly will begin its 100-day regular session this Tuesday. The ruling Saenuri Party vowed to pass a set of bills aimed at reforming Korea's labor market, and President Park Geun-hye's reform drive centered on the public, finance, and education sectors. The MPAD says its goals for the upcoming session are to promote public livelihood, economic revival, labor reform, and national unity. Also on the agenda for the rival parties are next year's budget and the inspection of government offices. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
More and more state-run corporations are falling in line with the government's drive to adopt a so-called wage peak system. In August, a total of 65 public institutions implemented it, and that's a huge jump from just 11 a month before. The government has been urging the public sector to adopt this system, warning that bonuses and other benefits could be withheld if they refuse. On Sunday, the state-run Government Employees Pension Service became the latest to adopt it. Under this system, the salaries of workers nearing retirement age are lowered gradually in return for more time on the job, with those funds redirected to hiring younger workers. Korea's ruling Saenuri Party is set to unilaterally introduce bills related to free trade agreements at a plenary session of the Parliamentary Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee on this Monday. The 5 FTA-related bills, which the party seeks to push ahead with, include pending FTAs with China, New Zealand and Vietnam. Party lawmaker Na Kyung-won, who is also the committee chairwoman, announced the party's decision last week, saying the FTAs are needed now more than ever. She added that if rival parties cannot reach an agreement, the ruling party would be left with no choice but to manage the committee according to parliamentary law. Vietnam has leapfrogged Japan to become Korea's 4th largest export market. Data from the Korea International Trade Association and the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency shows the Southeast Asian country exceeded Japan for the first 7 months of this year, thanks largely to a surge in shipments of intermediate goods, including components for wireless communication equipment. Korean exports to Vietnam amounted to $16.35 billion in the January to July period. Shipments to Japan over the same period were roughly $15.5 billion. Korean exports to Vietnam jumped more than 29% in the 7-month period from a year ago. During that period, China was Korea's largest export market at more than $79 billion, followed by the US and Hong Kong. Now, as with most countries around the world, Korea is heavily dependent on China in terms of trade, as we just heard. And that's a cause of concern, as a new report suggests China's slowing growth could have a direct impact on the domestic economy down the road. Kim Min-ji reports.
China's weakening growth could have a dire impact on the Korean economy. That's according to a report by Hyundai Research Institute, which says China's slowdown is raising concerns of a possible triple-dip recession for the local economy. China's growth has been trending downward since 2007, reaching only 7% in the first half of this year, with some analysts mulling over whether to revise next year's outlook down to the 6% range. For Korea, that could spell disaster, as China accounts for nearly a third of its exports. The report said that should the growth rate fall below 5%, Korea's exports will fall 4 percentage points, while its economic growth will fall 1 percentage point. If China records growth in the 5% range, Korea's exports will fall 2.2 percentage points and growth 0.6 percentage points. The report called for preemptive measures, which include systematic management of foreign reserves, as well as fostering a strong domestic economy to prevent the worst-case scenario. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The number two at the US Federal Reserve has left the door open for a rate hike in September. Speaking at an annual economic conference in Wyoming over the weekend, Fed Vice Chairman Stanley Fischer said that factors that have kept inflation below the central bank's target level of 2% have likely begun to fade. The Federal Reserve's key policy meeting is set for September 16th and 17th. Investors, governments and central banks around the world are bracing for the Fed to start raising rates in the near future. Rates have remained near zero since the 2008 global financial crisis. The European Union has decided to hold an emergency meeting 2 weeks from now in a bid to step up action to handle the continent's escalating migration crisis. In a statement on Sunday, Luxembourg, which currently holds the EU's rotating presidency, said the EU's Interior and Home Affairs ministers will meet on September 14th in Brussels to try and tackle the situation. The Luxembourg government added that political actions are underway to assess the situation on the ground and to discuss the next steps. The call for a meeting comes after the ministers of Germany, France and Britain jointly requested an urgent meeting earlier in the day. An Italian energy company says it has discovered a supergiant gas field in the Mediterranean Sea covering around 100 square kilometres. The gas field could hold the energy equivalent of up to 5.5 billion barrels of oil. Eni, the company which unearthed it, says it won't know the field's true size until it begins to develop it. Located in the deep waters off the northern coast of Egypt, Eni claims the gas field could be the largest in the entire world. The company estimates that, once developed, the field could satisfy Egypt's natural gas demand for decades. For years now, Korea's state-run agricultural agency has been sharing domestic farming techniques with developing countries around the world to help them become more self-sufficient. The latest example can be seen on the island nation of Sri Lanka. Our Won Ji-yeon reports.
These farmers work all day under the sun to cultivate onions, a major cash crop for Sri Lanka. Although the summer is normally considered a good season for growing onions, the country's intense heat can make harvesting very difficult. In fact, Sri Lankan farms produce an average of 15.5 tons of onions per hectare, only a fourth of Korea's production. Sri Lanka also lags in terms of quality and variety of onions produced due to the susceptibility to insect infestation on its farms. Korea's Rural Development Administration has decided to intervene with a project called COPIA, or the Korea Project on International Agriculture. COPIA has set up test farms in 3 different regions in Sri Lanka, each varying in climate. At these farms, Korean officials demonstrate some of Korea's effective farming techniques for Sri Lankan farmers.
Our strategy aims to help these farmers become more self-sufficient as soon as possible.
The program's initial goal is to increase the amount of onion production in the region. By helping farmers figure out which type of onions are best suited for the various regional conditions, COPIA hopes to raise the self-sufficiency rate of Sri Lankan farms to as high as 70%. Won Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, Korean researchers have discovered the mechanism behind a new treatment principle for cancer. It's hoped the findings will enhance existing treatment options to facilitate the development of new anti-cancer drugs. Park Se-young reports.
Immunotherapy helps restore or enhance a cancer patient's immune system. This treatment option is widely used because it doesn't cause pain or nausea. A research team from Korea has now discovered an antibody that generates anti-tumor immunity, taking a step closer to the development of more efficient anti-cancer drugs. When patients are injected with the antibody, it stimulates helper T cells and induces an immune response by enhancing the function of dendritic cells. Researchers tested the antibody on mice with colorectal cancer. After 3 weeks, the treated specimens had their tumors reduced to about 1/5 the size of those that did not receive treatment.
The antibody produces outstanding anti-tumor effects, but it's even more effective when used in combination with existing options. We expect our findings to dramatically prolong the lives of cancer patients.
The researchers' findings reveal the underlying mechanism of anti-tumor immunity generated by the specific antibody and was published in the journal Nature Medicine earlier this month. The antibody is currently undergoing clinical trials. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great day, and thank you as always for watching. We do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.